o'clock this afternoon. Now, a new off-Broadway theatrical play, The King, The Final Hours, will take a fresh look at the final hours of the late, the great Elvis Presley. And I'm delighted to say that an Irishman will be a part of the process. He is consulting producer John Aidan Byrne. John, good afternoon to you.
Hey, good afternoon, Justin. Great to be on your show.
John, this show, it's taking the final hours of Elvis Presley and taking a new perspective towards it. How did you get involved in the project?
Serendipitous, a bit of happenstance, and a good bit of old-fashioned Irish crack, all mixed together in one. I have known the producer and playwright, Mark Macias, for many years. Mark is an Emmy Award winner and nominee who worked as an executive producer at NBC and then as a senior producer with CBS in New York. And he works in media, and I work in media. Mark's a superb writer and skilled writer. So anyway, this past winter we met one morning over coffee in Manhattan, and it was in the depths of a really New York City freezer. My ears felt as if they were going to fall off with frostbite. So anyway, inside this warm coffee shop, we were shooting the breeze about what we were each working at. And Mark told me how he was hard at work on his jukebox musical, The King, The Final Hours. So I was just intrigued and hooked. So I, we joked and I was teasing him about it. And I said, Mark, you got to get me a cameo on this. And I said, I want to read your script. And so not long after that, the script arrived in my inbox here, and I actually swallowed it up whole. It was superb. It was an exhilarating experience, tightly written, authentic, three-dimensional, with some of Elvis' favorite numbers included. And so, I got on the phone to Mark. I said, God, you've got a hit on your hand here, Mark. And we swapped ideas and thoughts. And I mentioned to Mark how there were many layers in the musical, and that's the interesting part of the production. From the whole central idea at the heart of this play, that it's a love story, a conflict, as it were, between two loves, a forbidden love and the love that Elvis had in public for Priscilla, and also there was a conflict there explored about Elvis's genuine religious and deep faith and love of God as a Southern Pentecostal Christian. So I came at that through my own faith as a practicing Catholic, and has sort of meshed some of my ideas and thoughts together in our conversation. And Mark started sort of light went off in his head, I guess, because he soon came back to me afterwards and offered me a role as a consulting producer. And so I immediately accepted. I was delighted to work with this superb playwright and play some kind of a subsidiary role, as it were. And the rest, Justin, is literary history.
John, how much did you know about Elvis, his life and works, before you read the script?
Probably not much more than the average person. I mean, I'm intrigued by 60s culture and music and the Elvis life story and backstory. So on some level it was quite superficial. On another level, it was quite extensive in that I would have been familiar with, many of his movies and certainly some of his songs, but I was never, a collector of Elvis memorabilia or music. But in recent years, I've become fascinated by this whole Southern influence on, modern, as it were, rock and roll, from, the Rolling Stones to Elvis Presley. And there's an interesting connection there, that Elvis was influenced by, at one point, the African American community, predominantly where he resided. He listened to their music and gospel singing. And as we know, the Rolling Stones were influenced by the blues, which is a phenomena out of the African American community. So all of those thoughts percolated in my head, and I thought I could bring that to the play, and I guess that's part of what I'm bringing, as it were, in another dimension and layer to the production.
But coming to this story and reading this script, how did it kind of alter your understanding of Elvis and his life and works?
Some of it was new to me. I mean, quite frankly, I bought into some of the image that was put out there by the Elvis branding machine. This wholesome character, as it were. But as we know, that wasn't always the case. There was a lot of tragedy and sadness in Elvis's life. But the way Mark teased out the many layers, and through his in-depth research, he was able to discover many things in Elvis's life that I just simply wasn't aware of, and I found fascinating, and just deepened my respect for Elvis, and realized the many commercial, cultural, and spiritual challenges he faced.
Because it's an interesting thing when you're dealing with someone of the stature of Elvis, an icon like that. Sometimes you have a very kind of two-dimensional view of who they are and what they represent.
Absolutely, and that two-dimensional image and portrait was one largely shaped by the branding machine. And so people who closely follow the life of Elvis, and as I've gotten into his life further, you realize soon enough that there are other dimensions.
Now, Elvis's later years, you particularly focusing on the final hours, there is a view of Elvis's final years that the hallmark of them is excess. How does that correspond, or how does that sit alongside his deep religious faith that you've referred to a few times during this interview?
He was conflicted. There's an interesting line in the play about refers to the fact that Elvis, like other artists, loved the adulation of the large crowd and the large audiences, and it was kind of like an addiction. And I've heard that artists talk about that over the years, and it comes in various flavors. I guess it's sort of an egocentric thing, where it can destroy or make you a better person. And on some levels, it damaged an already fragile character who was Elvis Presley. He loved getting up on stage, and at one point there's a line in the play where he wanted to have a large crowd at his comeback tour organised by the Colonel, and he soaked that up, and it was like an adrenaline injection. He came to life suddenly, and then later in the life, in his final hours, he's visited by a voice and says, and it refers to how the only person you really have to impress or adore, as it were, was, Jesus in heaven. So it sort of, took him from, the secular world of entertainment and the crowds to what might be, and we might imagine to some extent, in the afterlife and on the other side.